My name's Connie. I'm an addict. Yeah, I could tell you stories about Greg. That's not why I'm up here. No, I'm really grateful to be here. I came to a lot of these early on in the 80s when they first started, and then I've moved all around the country, so I've missed a lot of them. But back in Ohio, so I'm back here on a regular basis, and I'm very honored tonight to introduce to you somebody that's been in my life for 32 years. And, some relationships work and some don't. I've never had, this is the longest sponsee I've ever had, and I can tell you we don't do it the same. We're not a clone of each other, even though people think we are. We take turns being the light for each other, and I think that's what sponsorship's supposed to be about, rather than putting us all up, on these big stools that we have. But, she has been a very important part of my recovery for a long time, and she's still there, and she's still doing service. And a lot of us, we get a lot of clean time. We're not serving anymore. We're not picking up a newcomer. We're not doing what we need to be doing. And I can tell you, Joe's still doing it. She's still active, and I don't know many women with decades clean that still put in the heart and soul I've seen this woman put into NA. She's a human being. I can give you her inventory too, but I won't do that. But I'm just very blessed to have her in my life, and probably the most challenging I've ever sponsored. But I don't learn from the easy people. I don't. She has given me a lot of my growth and my recovery, and she's never given up on me, and I've never given up on her. With that, I'll give you Josie from Akron, Ohio.
Thing looks like a two-headed monster. Good evening. My name's Joe. I'm an addict. Indulge me for just a moment, if you will. This is my favorite vantage point at a convention. We are such a special and unique bunch, and I like to take a minute to just kind of soak you guys in. Because once I get going, once I get into my zone, I won't see you and I won't hear you. I just kind of get into a zone and I'm there until I'm done. So I like to take a minute to just look around and to just be with you for a second. Being introduced is always a strange thing. You never know what somebody's going to say. You never know whether they're going to try and embarrass you or whether they're going to try and say something funny or something touching. Thank you, Connie, for what you said this evening. The strangest thing I ever had happen to me, and I was really hoping she wasn't going to do anything like bizarre when she was introducing me. The strangest thing I ever had happen to me when I was introduced was at a Day of the Dinosaurs old-timers reunion kind of thing down in Cincinnati several years ago. I think everybody who spoke had to have, more than 20 or more than 25 years. And there was a whole bunch of us from northeastern Ohio, and we spoke one right after another. And they were going to have a dance that night after the speaker jam. So there was a DJ there, and I have to stress to you that I did not know this DJ. I had never seen nor met this DJ before in my life. So as the speakers were being introduced, he would play a little snippet of music while the person was weaving their way up through the crowd to the front of the room. And for everybody else, he put on some jazzy little musical ditty, right? So I get introduced, and you know what Holmes puts on? Super Freak. I'm walking through the crowd to She's a Very Kinky Girl. I get up to the podium and I'm like, I guess my fourth step made it to the internet. It's hard to find your zone after that, let me tell you. So this journey in Narcotics Anonymous has been, wow, it's been good, it's been bad, it's been horrible, it's been weird, it's been everything. You know, when you're here long enough, we get to experience the full realm of life. You know, the highest of highs, the most amazing of successes, the things I could not have even imagined. I couldn't have even dared to dream when I got clean. You know, the first time I did my fourth step, and I'm going to tell you that I use illicit literature. I still bootleg the original fourth-step guide. And so I did my first step out of the original fourth-step guide, and one of the questions at the end was, what do you want out of life? And my very deep answer at 16 years old, because I got clean when I was 16, was that I wanted a 6'5" blonde with blue eyes. At 10 years clean, he came and went. He was way more trouble than he was worth. That was as big as I was able of dreaming. That was the capacity of what I could imagine that maybe I could get out of life when I first strolled in here. I couldn't dream very big. And the things that have happened have been wild. I've been on national television. There's been a book written about something that I did, something my colleagues and I did. It's been amazing. I could not have made this stuff up. There's also been some really rough stuff. Connie's had to pull me out of the gutter more than once, out of the emotional gutter more than once. And I've been able to do the same for her. I got clean on October 31st, Halloween, very fitting for me, of 1984. I grew up in a community where a lot of my friends, no, I can't say that. A lot of the people I associated, or a lot of the people I grew up around, because I've never really had a lot of friends ever. A lot of the people I grew up around got cars for their 16th birthday. I got something a little bit different. I got jewelry, bracelets, the kind you wear behind your back. A nice man came to pay me a visit the day after my 16th birthday. And he said, "You can't do that in this town." It was the start of my journey. In 1984, there weren't a lot of places that were willing to take juveniles into treatment unless it was an emergency. And the fact that I got my dumb ass arrested was not considered an emergency by anybody except me. Imagine that. But, you know, things fell into place. And that's been my experience through this journey, is that if we wait long enough, if we can be patient long enough, things fall into place. And things fell into place, and I ended up in a facility, and a judge ordered me to go for an evaluation. And you know, I remember very, very vividly the ride to that facility. And I remember my cocky thinking, yeah, I can go do this evaluation. I can spend 10 days here. I can tell them what they want. I'm fast on my feet. I write good speeches. I'm quick. I'm intelligent. I can tell them what they want to hear. 10 days later, I'm out of here, right? And so I left that facility 6 weeks later. It didn't quite go like I had it planned. But in 1984, there weren't a lot of places talking about Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm really grateful for those of you who do H&I, and for those of you who do public relations, because we have been able to infiltrate treatment centers. And we have been able, yes, to get the message of Narcotics Anonymous and that NA works. We've been able to help debunk the bullshit that there's no clean time in NA. Yeah? Woo! If you don't believe that there's clean time in NA, be in this room tomorrow night. Yeah, baby. So we've been able to change the minds, but in 1984, there weren't a lot of treatment centers talking about Narcotics Anonymous. And the one that I ended up in wasn't. So they had me look at the first step of another fellowship. And they had me write it down. And I went back to my little room, and I thought about it for a little bit. And I came back a couple of days later to this lady who was in charge of me. And I said, that's not it. That's not it. And she said, okay, we know about people like you. You take this word out, you put this word in. By the way, that's called manipulation. And she said, you say, we admitted that we were powerless over drugs and that our lives had become unmanageable. I wrote it down. I went back to my room. I thought about it. And I came back to her a couple of days later. And again, I shook my head and I said, that's not it. That's not my problem. She said, what is your problem? I said, I don't know. But that's not it. Now look, I was 16 years old. I had all of about 4.5 minutes clean. And unfortunately, I knew more about the first step than this lady who was in charge of me, because I spoke the truth that day. I'm not powerless over drugs. I never have been, and I never will be. Drugs are inanimate objects. They're not going to get me. They're not going to get you. There's not a drug in the world that's ever chased me down the street, mugged me, and forced me to consume it. Right? Ever happened to you? That's some scary stuff, right? The first step in Narcotics Anonymous talks about us being powerless over the disease of addiction. But I didn't have that language then. They weren't telling me that. So what happened to me was, for the rest of my stint in this lovely facility, they tried to throw every solution in the whole wide world at me, right? Did it. And by the time I waltzed out their door, and by the way, when you go to treatment on the last day, when they kick you out, when they throw you out the door at the end, you know what they say to you? Go to meetings. There's the magic. I just saved you all 6 weeks and $20,000. Go to meetings. And by the time I waltzed out their door and they kicked me out and told me to go to meetings, they had me believing that I was, you'll like this, a chemically dependent drug addict, alcoholic, overeater with emotional problems, and I smoked too much. And that's funny today, but you know what it was then? Lonely. I really believed, with a title like that there wasn't anybody else like me. How could anybody understand me? How could anybody help me? I was ashamed. I felt really alone. But once again, things fell into place. While I was in that facility, I didn't bring my text. While I was in that facility, somebody had gotten my mom a meeting schedule for Narcotics Anonymous. Now, let me tell you that when I got clean, Narcotics Anonymous was in its infancy in this part of the United States. In the county where I got clean, there were 2 NA meetings and 1 H&I meeting. Now, for those of you who have been here for a minute, you'll chuckle at what I'm about to say. We didn't know any better. H&I meetings were on the regular meeting schedule. We would go in, we would be doing an H&I meeting at the detox center, and people would walk in off the street looking for a meeting. Hi. Crazy. And so we're not only trying to carry the message to the people in the detox center, we're trying to deal with this wacky person who's like all whacked out and just walked in off the street looking for a meeting. It was nuts. But we didn't know any better. We were learning. It was a big learning curve. I tell you what, in the mid-'80s, it was a fantastic time to get clean because Narcotics Anonymous was on fire. Absolutely on fire. The basic text had just come out. In case you don't know, we didn't always have a basic text. That was launched in 1982? 83? It was printed? So I got clean the year after the basic text came out, and there was so much excitement in Narcotics Anonymous because we were finally legitimate. We finally had our own book. We finally had something that spoke our language. So somebody got my mom this meeting schedule for Narcotics Anonymous, and I went to my first NA meeting. In fact, our meeting schedule had to say meetings in and around, in and nearby Columbiana County, because there just simply weren't meetings. In order to get to a meeting every day of the week, we had to go to 5 counties in 3 different states. I get really intolerant when people say, oh, the meeting's like 10 minutes away, that's too far. Right? What, if you can't look out your front door and see a meeting, it's too inconvenient for you to go and save your life? Really? Recovery's not about convenience, in case you didn't know that. It's about saving your life. Yeah? Right. So I went to my first NA meeting the day after I got out of treatment, and with that huge, long title of what they told me that I was in the rehab center. And I was ashamed, and I was embarrassed. And a couple of really neat things happened at my first meeting. Like most of you, I don't remember a lot about what happened at my first meeting. But when they asked for newcomers, I stood up. I spit out about half of that title because I was ashamed. And after the meeting, people lined up to hug those of us who had identified ourselves as newcomers. It was so cool. It was so welcoming, you know. And people said really nice things to me. They said, we're glad you're here, keep coming back, yada, yada, yada. One guy, I think I remember who it was, but I'm not positive, but this one guy said to me, he hugged me, and he said to me, welcome home. And that impacted me. Because I don't know about you, but at the end of my road, at the end of my active addiction, there were a lot of places I wasn't welcome anymore. I was a dope-dealing thug. I shorted you on what I sold you. I waited until you passed out, and I stole it back. I don't know nothing about that. I slept with your husband. I stole your stuff. I threw up on your carpet. There were a lot of places I was no longer welcome. And this guy who had never seen me before said to me, welcome home. And that impacted me. It made me feel like I belonged here. By the way, when I got my welcome key tag does not look like yours. In 1984, our welcome key tags were hot pink. It had an AA saying on it because we didn't know any better. Our 30-day key tags were white. We did not have an orange key tag at that point. I believe those changed about 1986, 1987. I still have mine. I can prove it. But I want to share with you something that we talked about at my home group Thursday night. Something really important. I want to share with you how I knew about Narcotics Anonymous. You are the message. Every single one of us is the message. The people that we interact with that may not even know that we're carrying the message, or we may not even know we're carrying the message to them. I learned about Narcotics Anonymous because a guy at my high school had gone off to rehab, and when he came back, he promptly hooked himself up with me. I didn't know I was a bad influence. And we were sitting in his car one night, and I was trashed. I was like 8 sheets to the wind, right? And he rips his keys out of his ignition, and he sticks this green thing in my face. And I look at it, and on one side it says, clean and serene for 60 days. And you know when you're about to be told, like, a hard dose of reality, and you know it's coming, and you don't want to know anything about it? That was one of those moments. I knew that he was going to tell me something really, really real that was going to mess with my mojo, and I didn't want to know anything about it, right? So I didn't ask, but I flipped it over, and it said NA on the back. And I asked him, what did NA stand for? He told me it stood for Narcotics Anonymous. That was the one and only time I had ever heard of you guys before I ended up here. But it stuck. It stuck in the filing cabinet in my head, and it was like a homing beacon. Somehow, when the time was right, when I was at the end of my road, when I was beaten, when I was defeated, and when I was ready, somehow I knew where I belonged. And so with that meeting schedule, I went to my first meeting, I got my welcome key tag, I went to my next meeting on Tuesday night, which became my first home group, the Tuesday meeting, and we had very original names for our meetings back then. The meeting that became my home group was the Lisbon Group. There was none of these fancy, singy-songy meeting names, it was the Lisbon Group, right? And the first meeting I was at in Youngstown, Ohio, was like 75 people. I thought maybe they were all like that, right? So I walk into this meeting on Tuesday night, and there's 5 people. And they're all dairy farmers. And I got to tell you that because of the sharp contrast between them and me. I did not look like this in 1984. Yeah. Our literature says we came to our first NA meeting in defeat and didn't know what to expect. I came to my first NA meeting clad in black leather from head to toe and didn't know what to expect. I had a big black leather spiked dog collar. I had a big black leather spiked wristband. I had big Grim Reapers hanging out of my ears. I had lots and lots of black eye makeup on. My hair was baby shit orange. My fingernails were like green or purple or something. So I walk into this room full of dairy farmers, and they look at me, and they're like, "Oh, Lordy, she's going to scare the cows. We got a live one." The woman who became my first sponsor said she took a look at me, and she told me this when I had 5 years clean. She said she took one look at me and went, "Oh, she'll find somebody to sleep with and she'll disappear." Surprise! I'm still here. They did not treat me like a freak. They did not treat me like a juvenile. They didn't pat me on my head and tell me how cute I was. They treated me like exactly what I was, a desperate, dying addict. Somehow they knew that this facade that I had put on, all of this black leather, all of these Grim Reapers, all of this makeup, all of this strangeness, was to keep you at bay. They knew that it was my wall between me and you. And you know, like I said, I was a dope-dealing little thug, and that was necessary for me in active addiction. Because look, all of us try and get over on our dealers, right? And when you're a young female dope slinger, people really think that they can get over on you. And so sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to prove different. And what I had to do was I had to be extraordinarily violent, and I had to put on this facade that made you think that I was crazy. The crazier you thought I was, the less you messed with me. It took me a while to lose that. It took me a while to realize once I came here that I didn't need that mess anymore. I didn't need to put on that facade. There wasn't anything I needed to frighten you about or keep you at bay about. But I had lived that way for so long that I didn't know who or what or if there was anything underneath of it. I had become that. You know, when I did my first fifth step, I was in that process of like step 5. Somebody asked me a really deep question, and it really, really threw me off base. They said to me, "So what do you like to do?" And I went, I don't know. And I didn't. I had no idea. It was this surreal experience that I had lived in this body, and I had absolutely no idea who I was. Maybe you've had that experience too, because of all the falseness that we have put up, all the lies that we have lived, all of the lies that we have told ourselves, how we've lost ourselves in whatever. And so a lot of my journey in step 6 and 7 was about finding myself, was about discovering myself, about discovering what did I like to do, what was I good at. You know, when I was in the midst of all of that mess, there were things that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't wear pastel colors because that was girl stuff. Guess what? I'm a girl. Yeah, for those of you who thought you were coming to hear a man tonight, surprise. I wouldn't wear a skirt or a dress because that was girl stuff. I wouldn't do stuff that I thought was in any way, shape, or form feminine or made me look weak. So I had to start discovering, why am I so afraid of that? Why am I so afraid of the fact that I'm a female? Why am I so afraid of just being human? Doggone. So I started trying different things, and we started doing different things. I found out I am the only Italian woman on the face of the earth who cannot cook. Okay? I started a fire once making popcorn, true story. Okay? It's bad. It's bad. Somebody said to me once when I was married, "It can't be that bad." My husband said, "Yes, it can." I couldn't swat him. It was true. You know? If I ever offer to cook for you, run. I'm mad at you, and I am overtly trying to kill you. Okay? So I can't cook. I learned that. Some of the things I also learned is that I am a master cross-stitcher. Cross-stitch is a type of a needle art, and I can make very fine things. I can do extraordinarily beautiful things. Some people in this room have some things that I have made. That's one thing that I discovered that I'm good at. Now look, when I am being okay with me, I can just tell you that. When like the dark side boils back up in me, I tell you, yeah, I like to cross stitch because it gives me a certain amount of relief and relaxation to repeatedly stab a piece of material with a blunt needle. Okay, the dark side is still there somewhere, okay? After meetings, a lot of us would get together, and one of our favorite activities after meetings was building jigsaw puzzles. Now, how corny can you get, right? But we would all get together at my house. We would build these jigsaw puzzles. We would yuck it up. We would laugh. And let me tell you about something that happened one night. I hope you guys all have like hope lines in your area where addicts call looking to try and find information about Narcotics Anonymous. Well, where we live, the hope line is answered by an answering service. These people are not addicts. They're a paid answering service. They take the caller's name and number, and then they call a member of NA and say, you know, Susie Addict just called, and this is her phone number. She would like to talk to somebody. So we were all sitting around my dining room table one night building a jigsaw puzzle after a meeting, and we get this call from the Hope line. And there was no like men calling men and women calling women because there frankly weren't enough people to do that. So we got a Hope line call. So we called this person back, happened to be a man, and nobody answered. And we called and we called and we called, and we thought, we're going to take some literature over to this person. So look, I lived in a small town. Our phone book, and for those of you who are younger, a phone book was a book that had a listing of phone numbers and people's addresses in it. And so our phone book was only about yay thick. It was only like maybe a half-inch thick. We went through the entire white pages section of the phone book. We had somebody's like driver's license or something with a flat edge, and we went down column after column after column, looking for this number so we could match it with an address so we could take some literature to this individual. We never found the number. It must have been an unlisted number. But that was the kind of stuff we did. We invested. When somebody was reaching out, we knew that their life was at stake. We knew our lives had been at stake, and it's what brought us to NA. We knew your life was at stake, and we invested. We reached out. That's what like 12-step work is about. So that's a neat experience I have. And when I think about doing corny stuff about like building jigsaw puzzles, I don't think about, oh, we build a puzzle of like hot air balloons. I think about looking for somebody in a phone book. That's my memory that's attached to that. You know, we didn't have enough people to have committees. We didn't have an H&I committee. We didn't have a public relations committee. We didn't have enough people. There were 5 people in the area where I got clean. If you had a pulse, you were doing service, right? You know how you got a service position? You went to the bathroom. When you came back, you said, guess what you are? And there was no, like, state your resume. They were like, you got a pulse, you're in. So I became the literature chair with, like, minutes clean. And what the literature chair did in our area was very different than what literature chairs do now. We had 2 meetings and an H&I meeting and 1 box of literature. And that literature had to be taken to each of those meetings and the H&I meeting. If I didn't show up with the box of literature, the meeting didn't happen. So it either, number 1, got me there, or number 2, got me responsible enough to call somebody and say, I can't be there tonight, can you come get the box of literature? It made me feel a part of. It made me feel like you guys welcomed me. It taught me some responsibility. It taught me accountability. But most importantly, it made me feel valued. It made me feel a part of this thing. So at some point, I said, hey, how come there's not more meetings around here? And this cat in our area smiled at me and said, "Start one." Now that's just enough information to give a newcomer to make them dangerous, right? Because I didn't want to admit that I didn't know what I was doing. Too proud for that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start a meeting. Okay, so what do I gotta get? I gotta get a meeting place. How do you find a meeting place? I know who might know where there's a meeting place. Pick up the phone, and I called the mayor. This is how not to start a meeting, by the way. So I called the mayor of our little town, and I'm like, yo, look, we're trying to start this NA meeting, and I'm wondering if you know any place that might be available to us. And he said, is it a service to the community? I'm like, yeah, we're going to help people get off drugs. And he says, well, there's this old courtroom. We don't have mayor's court anymore. I don't see there's any reason why you guys can't use this courtroom. Sounds like it's good for the community. So I start my first meeting, and by the way, when we start meetings, it should always be at least 2 to 3 people who commit to being there every single week for at least the first year. If you are the only 3 people there, your happy butts better be in the chair, right? But I started a meeting by myself, start this little meeting, call the mayor. It didn't last really long. Not a lot of people came to it. I'm sure that had absolutely nothing to do with the fact it was over top of the police station. I wasn't afraid anymore. I don't know what your problem was. But you know what? Connie and I sat in that meeting week after week after week, the 2 of us, just sitting there looking at each other. And we kept hoping for a newcomer and hoping for a newcomer and hoping for a newcomer. And the answer we got, she's not here tonight. She must be down in the other speaker meeting. There's a lady here tonight at this convention named Renee. She's going to celebrate 30 years clean in December. She showed up with her boyfriend because she was there for support, right? He had just gotten out of this treatment center, which she repeatedly called Eddie's place like it was a bar, right? This woman babbled for 45 minutes. We were so grateful she was there, we just let her talk. And that's kind of how early meetings rolled, They were a little bit more free-flowing because we could. There came a time that I moved to the Pacific Northwest because even in recovery, I thought that a geographical cure would be a good idea. So I ended up in Boise, Idaho, which is a long story. You don't want to hear it. Meetings out there were a trip. I was told out there, look, I was told here when I came here to commit to a fellowship. And let me talk a little bit about this first. I came here and I learned about the first step of Narcotics Anonymous. And the light bulb went on when I heard we were powerless over our addiction. I didn't know what it meant, but somehow I knew that puzzle piece just fell into place for me. And the longer I was here and the more people talked to me and explained that to me, the clearer it became and the more it fit, the more it was perfect for me. Powerless over the disease of addiction. What I'm powerless over is the fact that I have an incurable disease. They can't cut it out. They can't do surgery and cut it out. They can't do chemo and radiation and make it go away. There's no therapy. There's no cure for this thing that I have. That's what I'm powerless over. The disease is not about a drug or any subset of drugs or any category of drugs. My first sponsor, when we talked about the first step, she had me open up the basic text to chapter 8 called We Do Recover. For those of you who don't know, the italicized part of We Do Recover is Jimmy Kay's story. And Jimmy Kay was one of our founders. And it says this: we know well 2 things that make up true addiction: obsession and compulsion. Obsession is that fixed idea that takes us back time and time again to our particular drug or some substitute to recapture the ease and comfort we once knew. And that compulsion is once we start that with just one, we can't stop through our own power of will. And my sponsor told me there was a third component to this disease: obsession, compulsion, and total self-centeredness. That's what makes us addicts, not what we use. And I want to dial back even a little bit more and talk about my experiences in early NA, because we didn't know what the hell to talk about in NA. We were all like fresh off the streets. Nobody had any clean time. The dinosaurs in our room had like 3 years. 3 years clean. Oh my God, how'd you stay clean for 3 years? Those were the dinosaurs in our rooms. We didn't know what to talk about. So there were still a lot of people in our rooms talking about specific drugs and how they put them in their bodies. And there was one that was talked about a lot. And I had not done that particular drug in that particular way. I had done the drug, but not in the particular way that they were talking about. And when I would go to meetings and hear people over and over and over and over talking about this, that thing in the back of my head said, maybe you're not bad enough. Maybe you don't belong here. Listen to them. You haven't done what they've done. I'm really, really grateful that people swooped me up and explained to me the first step. It's not about the dope. It's about the disease of addiction. It's about the fact that I've got this thing in my head that commands me to self-destruct. And if it can't convince me that getting high is a good idea, it'll come down the chimney. It'll come in through the side door. You know, it'll come at me any way it can until I'm backed into a corner that I don't want to get out of clean. In my first year clean, I put on like 50 pounds, and some of that was getting healthy because I was really skinny. Like a lot of us, I was really skinny when I got clean. Stay here, you won't be. So some of that was getting healthy, but some of it was the fact that my new friends Ben and Jerry were helping me to deal with these wacky things called emotions, right? Because I didn't know what to do with these things. I went from smoking a half a pack of cigarettes a day to smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Sometimes I found myself with one in each hand, you know? But I realized that it was just like using dope. I was trying to take something from outside of myself and jam it inside to change the way I felt. It was a coping mechanism. It was a way to deal with this weirdness of life, this weirdness. I didn't know what emotions were. My emotions certainly didn't know what they were because they'd been in a box for a long time. So they came out all sideways. When we get clean, our emotions come out all sideways. And for a lot of us, they all come out as anger, right? I'm happy, anger. I'm confused, anger. I'm horny, anger, right? Everything is anger, right? And I'm really grateful that nobody chased me out of these rooms while I was trying to find my way through. So I moved to Boise, Idaho, and here I had been taught that if I believe that I'm powerless over the disease of addiction, I can't really justify going to some place where the first step tells me that I'm powerless over an inanimate object. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't fit. I've never been to a meeting of another fellowship. Thank you. Again, recovery's not about convenience. And I hear people say, oh, I'm just going to go to this fellowship because it's right around the corner, or I'm going to go to this fellowship because whatever. I go where the truth is spoken to me. I go where I believe my life is going to be saved. I go where I'm like you, where you have the same monkey farm in your head that I have in my head, and we understand each other. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and people out there were telling me that you couldn't recover by going to one fellowship. Really? They had meetings in an abandoned strip plaza where there was no chairs. We sat on the floor. Now, that wasn't necessarily so bizarre because one of our early meetings that we started in a city called East Liverpool was in an abandoned bank building. They let us use this room, but there was no heat and there was no running water. We slept in water to make coffee and we froze our butts off in the middle of winter. We were grateful to have a meeting place. So early meetings were way different than they are now. We have creature comforts now, like running water and heat and lights and crazy things, chairs, crazy things. You guys are babied. But after a while of being out there, I realized that what I needed was what I found back here. The commitment to Narcotics Anonymous. I missed that more than I missed anything. I missed the people who were devoted to Narcotics Anonymous, I missed a crystal clear message. You know, when I was out there and they would go around the room and introduce themselves, every single person would be something different. And it was like a game for them to come up with different titles to give themselves. When I came here to a meeting, everybody said, I'm so-and-so, I'm an addict. And there was that point of unity. It was a First Tradition unity experience, and it made us all equal rather than separate, you know. I missed that. So I moved back here, and I've been here ever since. I've always believed in having a home group. A home group, and if you're brand new, let me break this down, because I do a lot of H&I work now, and sometimes when I go in and when I talk to the ladies in the correctional facility about a home group, they think it's a meeting in somebody's house. So I want to break it down. A home group is a meeting that's out on a real meeting schedule, not in somebody's house, that I make a commitment to, that I believe that I can make it to every single week, and that I agree to invest in. And I'm not talking about investing with my wallet. I'm talking about investing by making sure the doors are open, the lights are on, that there's literature there, that people are being welcomed when they come in the door. If there's somebody new, they get a meeting schedule with some numbers, making sure that there's a message of recovery that's being carried there. I believe in showing up early and staying late. I get to my home group about 45 minutes early, and my home group's small. It's, like 15, 18 people. We have a very fortunate home group. A lot of our home group members have a lot of clean time, and it's a place where I get fed every week. If nothing else, I know it's like sliding across home plate, going safe. When I go into my home group, I know I'm going to get fed there week after week. I value the people there. When each of us walks in the door, we know each other well enough to know by our facial expressions and our body language how each of us is doing that day. I hope you have people in your life that you know like that. Those people know what's going on with me. I know what's going on with them. We know whose kids are in trouble. We know who's got medical issues. We know who's got successes going on in their lives. And we support each other. I hope you have people in your life that you have that kind of an intimate relationship with. I learned about intimacy here in Narcotics Anonymous, and it has nothing to do with being naked or horizontal. You know? Yeah, that's a good thing, because that don't work in my life. So I'm at my home group every single week, unless I'm out of state or dead, and neither of those is a 100% good excuse to not be at my home group. I believe that if I'm not going to be there, that I need to call other members of my home group and let them know that I'm not going to be there. Because if I just assume that other people are going to show up, and they all assume that I'm going to show up, and none of us shows up, the doors don't get open. How many people in this room have showed up to a meeting where none of the home group members showed up and the doors didn't get open? That's too many hands. That's too many hands. Not one hand in this room should go up. Please make sure you invest in your home group. Please. Those are our front lines. Our home groups are our front lines. It's where we reach the greatest number of people. When an addict is seeking recovery, they don't call the Public Relations Committee. They come to a meeting. They get online. They look on your little fucking Google things or whatever it is. They find a meeting. They show up there. The greatest service that we can provide to anybody is making sure that our meeting schedules are accurate. Both our printed and our online meeting schedules are up to date and accurate. It is a tragedy when somebody shows up and there's not a meeting there. They may never come back. We may only have one shot with people, folks. Because remember how desperate you were when you crawled into your first parking lot. Do you think you would have come back if you found a dark facility? I probably wouldn't have. So invest in our home groups. I love being involved in service. It keeps recovery vibrant for me. It helps me learn how to walk amongst the humans. You want to figure out how to work some principles? Get involved in service, right? We learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. We learn how to communicate. We learn how to compromise. I love what it says in the Living Clean book, that sometimes we need to learn how to shut up when we want to talk, and sometimes we need to learn how to stand up when we want to be quiet. We need to learn the difference between those things. You know, I'm grateful that I've got somebody to guide me. Speaking of somebody to guide me, I realized when I got to my 5th step that the woman who was my first sponsor wasn't the right match for me. Like most of us, I think most of us change sponsors at one point or another. Very few of us go from end to end with a single sponsor. But I got to that 5th step, and I realized that I needed somebody else to share it with. Now, remember I said in the area where I got clean, there were 5 people. 2 of them were women. I had a choice of 2 women to be my sponsor. You know how many I needed? 1. I also get really intolerant when people say, I can't find a sponsor. Well, I had 2. I had 2 to choose from. I needed 1. I'm looking for somebody to guide me through the steps, not somebody to have babies with, right? All they got to know is like something about the steps. So I asked this other woman, the only other woman in my area, if she would come over to my house. I didn't tell her why, you know. And, you know, we didn't even really like each other a whole lot at that point in time. There was a lot of competition. We were 2 of the very first young people to get clean and stay clean in this part of the United States, and there was a lot of competition between us. There was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of, like, mixed emotions between us. But she was the only one I had. And I knew that my life depended on doing this 5th step thing. So I call her over, I ask her to come to my house, I'm pacing around, I'm pacing back and forth. She finally says to me, why am I here? I pull out this manuscript. I don't know about your first 4th step, mine was like a manuscript. It was like hundreds of pages, right? Of crap, of garbage. It was as deep as I was capable of going, but it was garbage and it was like, so I pull out this manuscript and I'm like, would you hear my 5th step? And we spent the next 2 days going over this 5th step thing. That was probably the very first intimate conversation I ever had in my life. I learned that she had done many of the same things that I had done. She had experienced, she had felt the same things that I had felt and experienced. We learned that we dated some of the same guys, that we knew the same people, that we had played softball against each other and had never met. It was weird. It was really weird. Not long after that, the woman who had been my sponsor had the audacity to announce that she was moving out of state. I certainly was not ready for long-distance sponsorship at a few months clean. I asked Connie to be my sponsor. That was almost 32 years ago. I had about 6 months clean, and we have worked together ever since. It's not always been an easy relationship. There have been a lot of times when we haven't agreed with what the other one was doing, but we have always found a way to work through it. But let me share with you a couple of really important things. When I asked her to be my sponsor, she told me something really important. Don't put all your eggs in my basket. Get a support group. Because, you know, back then our phones had like curly cords and they were mounted on our walls in our kitchens. And she was like, look, sometimes I go on vacation and I can't talk to you. Sometimes I'm sick. Sometimes, frankly, I don't want to talk to you. And she told me, get a support group. Have other people that you can rely on. My sponsor has always been my touchstone to go to with the most important of my things. It's the person I work my steps with. It's the person I talk to about my most important of matters. But I have to have a support group, and that became vitally important in 1990. There was a person who got clean 3 weeks after I did. His name was Walt. He was one of my best friends, and he became Connie's fiancé. And on October the 10th of 1990, they were going to a meeting, and something happened, and there was an accident, and he died in her arms on the side of the highway in a motorcycle accident. She was unavailable to me for a long time. She was unavailable to everybody for a long time because she was trying to rebuild her life and figure out who she was and where she fit and what her life was about. I had no business taking my garbage to her and insisting that I impose on her life when she was going through that kind of thing. That was when the tables turned and it became my turn to be there for her. And if I didn't have those other people to lean on and to grieve with and to talk through stuff with, I would have been in a world of crap. I'm grateful that I listened. I'm grateful. You know, I don't have a gigantic support group. I don't have dozens of people that I bare my soul to. I've got a handful of them that I trust with my life. They know me to the core of my soul. They're some of the scariest people you'd ever meet in active addiction, right? And I trust them with my life today. It's a privilege to be a sponsor. You know, sponsorship certainly can be a challenge. Sponsees will break your heart. Just the time you think that they're hitting their stride, man, they just find the biggest building they can and swan dive off the top of it. But when it's good, it's good. You know, and we get to celebrate with each other. We get to really relish in each other's accomplishments, in each other's successes, in the growth of each other's lives. You know, we walk each other through life events, through jobs and job losses and marriages and divorces and children and grandchildren and gray hair and, oh my God, I'm old and fat. And, you know, and life is good. Life is good. I cannot imagine where else I would be. I don't have a family. You know, that whole relationship gig, I wasn't joking when I said that doesn't work for me. I've tried and tried and tried and tried. And after the last one was just way too much for me. And I went back to the only principle that I know. When something hurts that bad, the only principle that I know that works is total abstinence. Connie joked with me one time that I have a broken picker. And I prove it over and over and over again. Find me the sickest dude in the room, and I am attracted to him. A lady I rode down here with today called it the Build-A-Bear syndrome. I love that. Oh, let me fix you. I can help. Yeah. I'm not building any bears these days. And so look, I know that this wouldn't work for everybody. But I will tell you that my story is that I have not had a relationship in over 11 years now. And some people say if you want to really work your program, get involved in a relationship. But I'm going to tell you the flip side. If you want to work a program, spend some time with yourself. Make it so that you can't deflect your drama and your emotion and your crazy onto somebody else. Do you know what he did? I can't say that. I don't have anybody that I can call my sponsor and say, do you know what he did? I look in the mirror and I'm like, do you know what you did? And I know that doesn't work for everybody. I know that terrifies a lot of people. But I tell you what, I've come to the acceptance that this is my path. And it seems to bother other people a whole lot more than it bothers me. And there was a time that was not true. There were times that I would call Connie and I would just be weeping, you know. Why can't I find anybody? Why doesn't anybody want me? Blah, 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 blah. And she would say, I don't know, but it'll happen in time. And now it's totally flipped. And she calls me and she's crying, why can't you find somebody? I'm like, no, I'm good. Really, I'm good. I don't want the crazy in my life. You know, when I think about the jackwagons who have passed through my life, I'm like, no, the dog and I are good, really. I have a home group, I have a sponsor, I have service positions. For a long time, I couldn't do H&I because of my profession. I was involved in the criminal justice system for a long time, and I couldn't even go to meetings in my local area because they were full of my clients. So I had to drive to another county to go to meetings. By the way, if meetings are full of your clients, it's not an excuse to not go to meetings. I drove to another county, and I went to meetings in another county. And when my career changed and when the tables turned for me, I dove back into H&I. I love H&I. I'm not scared of the sound of the door slamming behind me, because you know what? When the presentation is over and we get up and I say, "Yo, CO," they let me out the door. I hear the sound of those flapping shoes in my sleep. People look at me weird when I tell them I've been in every prison in the state of Ohio. Really? Not as an inmate, no. So I dove back into H&I. It's my passion. I love H&I. It's fulfilling to me. You do H&I for personal fulfillment, not because you want to see all of those people come to meetings, because that's not going to happen. You know, occasionally they're going to come, and occasionally, even less occasionally, they're going to stay. But you do it because a lot of times in that moment when they're sitting there in front of you in a detox or in a jail, and you've got them, they've detoxed, and they're listening to you, you plant the seed. You see the light go on. One of my favorite things to do is study the Am I an Addict pamphlet in the correctional facility that I go into, and I see the oh shit looks. You know, we're reading that Am I an Addict pamphlet, and I see a lot of wide eyes and a lot of like, uh-oh. Uh-oh. One of my favorite things, we had a meeting that for a long time was an Ask It Basket meeting. And for those of you who don't know what an Ask It Basket is, we all put topics on a piece of paper and tossed it into the basket, and the basket would go around and everybody took a different topic and commented on it. My favorite topic that ever came out of that basket was obviously from a newcomer. The topic said, "How do I know if I'm an addict? And if I am, how fucked am I?" I was so grateful that somebody with Clean Time got that topic and got to talk to them about how your life has just begun. You know, one of my favorite lines in the basic text is, at least in my book, I don't know what the hell your book says these days, but in my book, the last line in step 12 says, "The steps do not end here, they are a new beginning." I've been in a really funky headspace for a couple of months, and I got real apprehensive about coming up here. I have no fear of public speaking, in case you can't tell that. I've made a living out of public speaking, from being an expert witness in court to being a college instructor to being a corporate trainer. Give me a microphone and 1,000 people, I'm completely at home. What terrifies me is one-on-one conversation. That terrifies me. So I have no fear of public speaking, but I've been in a really funky headspace for a couple of months, and I got apprehensive. I almost called down here and canceled because I was afraid of my own head. I went back to something that I know, that recovery doesn't exist in here. I got to drop it 18 inches. I got to get it to here. I got to get it to my heart. So I've spent a lot of time in meditation in the last couple of weeks. I've been doing some really extensive 11th-step work in the last year and a half or so. I've been having some really neat experiences. And in those experiences, I'm learning how to be less afraid of myself. And I'm learning how to find peace in the midst of the storm, because I've been in a storm for a while. At my home group Thursday night, we read out of the Living Clean book, and we do that once a month. We only do it once a month because, frankly, this book is aimed at people with clean time. And I take issue when this book is studied at meetings frequently that are full of newcomers, because this is aimed at people with clean time. Let's study our basic text in rooms that are full of newcomers. Let's give them a foundation with our foundational building blocks. But our home group has a lot of people with a lot of clean time, and we read this, and it would talk about things falling into place, talk about things being on time. The little segment we read Thursday night was called The Gift of Hope. and I want to share with you a couple of the sentences that jumped up and grabbed my heart Thursday night. We are good listeners, and we know how to find the strength and hope in our experience. We are on a path and are conscious of our journey. Telling the truth about ourselves doesn't just set us free. Our example frees others. Living out our choices takes courage, patience, and perseverance. We have to be willing to hang in there when it gets hard and keep going when we're not sure we're getting anywhere. Our greatest achievements may not be the things anyone else ever knows about. The simple fact that we survive our own stories is monumental. That we go on to help others and live lives we can be proud of is beyond our wildest dreams. Whatever we do, we make a difference in the world because we are clean. We made a difference in the world in a negative way when we were in the midst of active addiction. We were menaces to society. But today, we make a difference in the world because we are clean. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go outside and pray. Yeah. And then after that, everybody come back in and help clean up.
Oh, yeah. Is the merchandise room open?
Yes.
Oh, cool. 'Cause I forgot my...
As soon as the meeting's down there, so if it's